back to the class, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about resource management. More specifically, how to handle Kyrotech. Over the last couple of months, CG has made a lot of the gear more accessible, but with Kyrotech not being one of them, they become one of the major gear crunches that need some solutions. So that's really what this video is going to be about today. We're going to be looking at 3 key ways to beat the bottleneck. You're never going to entirely beat it, but there are some strategies we can use so that the pain is essentially lessened and you can take as much advantage as you can of everything that we're given in game. So the first thing that we need to understand before we get into kind of all the budgeting strategies is we have to have an income. We have to be getting Kyrotech. It doesn't matter, this is any resource ever. It doesn't matter what you do with it if you don't have any of it. So we need to go over what places are good for a bang for your buck and what places might seem nice in a pinch, but really should never ever buy from there because it's such bad value. So as you can see, I am right now actually stuck on my Death Trooper because I don't have enough Kyrotech, so this is a pretty relevant problem even for me. And I say even for me just because I'm kind of more end game account. But anyway, so the 2 main places that we're always going to be wanting to buy Kyrotech, we're going to have kind of 3 tiers here. And the 2 that I buy them every single time is the Grand Arena currency and Get To material. And I'm not exaggerating when I say every single piece of this, every single MK2, every single GAC currency that I get, it goes into Kyrotech every single time. I personally tend to favor the battle computer because when it comes to hard node farming, or rather just node farming in general, the shock prod has better value because it has more useful pieces on it than the battle computer does. But either way, I don't care which one you buy, just buy both of them every single time. I don't care if you're in Carbonite or if you're doing like SWGOH or Roach, it doesn't matter. Whatever you're doing, every single time Kyrotech needs to be bought with both of these 2 currencies. Those are the 2 musts. There are 2 other situational areas when we should also be getting Kyrotech from other places. The first situational area I want to look at is Get 3. Get 3 actually has really good value for Kyrotech. It's going to depend on how big the crunch is for you. For myself, I run into it occasionally, as I currently am with my whole Death Trooper scenario. But I typically want to buy micro attenuators here so that I can improve my mods because they need more improvement overall than I really need a Gear 13 Death Trooper at this point in time. But I think the majority of players, I would say the majority of players, are in the category where mods can wait for a second, at least from the attenuation perspective, need to go all in with Get 3. Like I said, the ratio is good. They're going to be one of the biggest bottlenecks. They're going to hold you back. Put this currency into it too to really help lessen that load and to get your characters further ahead, or even just get new characters at all functional and ready to go. The other situational place that we want to farm them from is the nodes. This is going to depend really on where your account is and what you need to happen at that time. Typically, the majority of your energy should be going for hard node farms to get all the characters that you do not currently have to build up the teams that you need, whether they be for an existing squad that you already have that needs to be better, or for an entirely new squad that you're going to be wanting to build up right now. Either way, that's where most of the energy should go. Whatever's left over after you've gotten the shards that you've wanted to get needs to go all in on Kyrotech. Again, I have already said that this node, I prefer it just because you get the MK5 Fabritech data pads, which are nice for bronzium wiring. If that's not really a relevant relic salvage that you need right now, then it probably doesn't matter. But in general, I prefer this node because it kind of helps lessen that bottleneck as well. So situationally, the node is also good. It has pretty good drop rates, different from a lot of the other stuff in game. So the last thing that I want to talk about as far as farming goes is the one place to never buy Kyrotech. Ever, and I mean ever. I guess if you're about to enter GAC lock and your Galactic Legends not Gear 13 or something like that, and you just need to finish it off, then you do it, but I still hate it. And that is going to be with the MK2 currency that comes in these weekly shipments. This is such a horrendous deal for a small amount of Kyrotech. Like, if you can help it, never buy it here. Even if you need it a lot, use the other 3 currencies we talked about, farm them on the node. All 4 of those are completely accessible. Don't do this one. This one's just so bad on so many levels. The MK2, you're going to need it for plenty of the other Gear 12 stuff, which if you're needing Kyrotech, you're probably at a Gear 12 level anyways, to the point where you're needing the gear in general. So just as a recap, 2 blessed places to get Kyrotech that have to happen: GAC currency and Get 2. the runners up to that would be farming it from the nodes, as well as getting Get 3, and never buy it with MK2 currency. So now that we've covered how we're getting the Kyrotech, we need to go over what are we doing with it. And these are going to be two different rules, but kind of the same in regards to roster building. We have to recognize that not every team is built the same. And I don't just mean that some teams suck and some teams are good. I mean that the amount of Kyrotech that goes into one team is vastly different, because at a certain point in time, CG decided that all characters below Gear 12 are going to need 200, 300, 400 Kyrotech to even get to the Gear 12 limit. And some teams have a ton of these characters. So what we're going to be suggesting is that not that you don't farm these teams, you should eventually farm them, but never do them back to back. So I have a few examples here of what we're going to call heavy Kyrotech teams. And these are teams that have 4 or 5 members that all require Kyrotech before Gear 12, basically the 300 amount. And never do these back to back. You will feel the crunch for such a long time. It will take forever. You will hate yourself. You will not enjoy the game because of the long slog that it is going back and forth between these. Like, there's other teams that do this too. But these three were the first that come to my mind when I'm thinking of heavy Kyrotech usage. If you need to get Bad Batch for Lord Vader because you want Lord Vader, that's great. That's fine. Just don't immediately go into Inquisitors right after. Let that stockpile recover slightly, or go and work on some other teams that are already not finished. Same goes for Amalgus. And there's other teams that kind of fall into this criteria. Instead, you don't need to completely stall your roster by doing that when you're not getting these heavy Kyrotech teams. I actually made a video, link will be in the description below. There are a lot of endgame teams out there that only require one character that needs Kyrotech before Gear 12. A really good example of it is CLS. The only character on this entire team, and it's a very good team, is Nubak, and he only requires 200 Kyrotech. This is very different from needing 1200 before Gear 12 on Bad Batch. When Bad Batch and CLS are arguably comparable teams, or you could really even make the argument that CLS is a one head above the Bad Batch team. But yeah, be on the lookout for these teams that only need one character with 200 Kyrotech, or even a 300 Kyrotech team as well. There's some really good options in here, like Jedi Knight Revan, or Zori, or even Traya herself. All kind of have that option. We also even have another video, I guess I'll put this in the description as well, about teams that don't require any Kyrotech. Grievous is a great example. That might be a very nice break after you get done with one of those larger slogs, or maybe you just don't have any Kyrotech in general and you need to move on to a different team. So again, know where to get Kyrotech. Do not do the heavy teams back to back. Know what you're getting into before you do. If we're going to plan, we're going to be strategic. Don't just pick a team and say, I like this team, I know it's good, I'm just going to go after it. Because that wall will hit you hard, and it can hold you back for weeks, if not months. And the final thing that we're going to talk about is teams that don't need to go all the way to Gear 13. So why is this relevant? We just talked a bunch about characters that need a bunch of Kyrotech before they hit the Gear 12 limit. Well, every character in the entire game, don't care who you are, every single character in the entire game require 100 Kyrotech to be able to take them to Gear 13. And there's a lot of requirements out there for other characters, or even just entry-level stuff to get into things like raids and whatnot, where you need to take the character to Gear 13. But there are some PvE events and a lot of PvP stuff where you can get away for a long time with Gear 12 and below squads where there isn't a lot of Kyrotech required. This is probably the biggest two examples that I still have in my roster. I have a very large roster at 10 million. It's not really a brag, but it's just going to show that some of these teams, even kind of way at the top where I'm at Gear 12, are still functional. They can still do things despite not having the 100 Kyrotech that she needed for Gear 13, the 100 that she needed, the 100 that she needed, the 100 that she needed, 100 that he needed, I think. 100 that he needed. You don't need to pump those 400 to 500 more relic levels into the team to get it functional. And there's more teams like this as well, depending on where you fall. We're in Kyber, but if you're down in a lower section like Herodium or Bronzium, you could get away with, say, Traya at Gear 12 will put in a lot of work. Bounty Hunters will put in a lot of work. Again, we've actually made an entire video about cheap teams that work before Relic, so look for that in the description below. I guess we have a lot of work to do when it comes to putting those in here. But that is going to be it for today, guys. Remember the 3 main keys we're looking for here. Know where to farm Kyrotech that is actually going to be a good deal. Main places being G, C, and Get 2. Next up, do not do heavy Kyrotech teams back to back. Take a break on one of those teams that only needs about 200. And then know and recognize which teams out there are fine at staying at gear 12 for a minute. Maybe not forever, but they can do it now while you go and work on something really large like Inquisitors. Thank you guys for watching. Until the next time, stay awesome.